I never know for sure when it's starting. So, okay. So welcome back to Make a Ripple Challenge. It's day 2. And I know Jennifer and Laura and Marilyn were able to either be here or listen to the recording. I'm not sure if Kirsty was, but how did that go for you with the passions that we talked about yesterday? Anybody who'd care to share a little bit about if you saw something new about yourself or connected to a memory that was significant for you, what was that experience like?
Like I said, for me, it was very novel. I haven't done that before per se. And then bringing that connection forward to my present day. So I thought it was a good exercise.
Oh, good. Good. Thanks for sharing, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was able to go quite far back. I was 3 years old. I know I was 3 because my mom was pregnant, but I didn't have a brother yet. I was the oldest in the family. And I remembered how fun-loving, how much I wanted fun and excitement. My dad and grandpa took me on a roller coaster ride when I was 3 years old, and I loved it. And I loved him ever since. And then when my baby brother was born, oh my gosh, it was like he was my doll. And my mom had to really watch me because I wanted to hold him and walk all over the house with him. And then I just noticed as I grew older, I became, quote, kind of a wiggly worrywurm in church and would get in trouble. And then I went to school and I was bright, so I could learn fast, but then I would talk to my neighbors and then I would get sent to the cloakroom. This was a long time ago. I'm older than the rest of you. I'd get sent to the cloakroom for talking. And, you can tell I'm still kind of that way.
Right. So yeah, it's interesting because I think it's always fun to look back at what was important to us and what was just really sparked us as kids, because that comes through all the way into adulthood. No matter what age you are, there's still some connection to that. So part of my goal with asking you about your passions, and also what we're doing today with perspective, is if you're ever going to share your story with other people, it's important to connect to what's unique about you first, so that you can understand your own story better and see what difference it's made in your life. And that impact that it's made on your life can carry over onto other people's lives too. So this is foundational. It's really important. So I love to start with passions because when we meet someone, we generally swap stories, right? That's how we get to know each other. And that's how humans connect. It's how we've connected for eons, right? It's that basic connection of understanding ourselves so that we can tell somebody else about us and we can open our hearts to learn about them. So that connection piece also goes to when you're writing, when you're connecting with a reader. It's super important that they know who you are. So knowing yourself well and being able to spark that passion and understand your perspectives is really important to start with. So that's foundational. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see how I do that. Okay, share my screen. And we'll look at our perspectives. So yesterday we talked about passions. If you are listening to this later and you haven't done the passion piece yet, you can get the workbook and work through those questions first. And the link to that will be below the video later, the replay. So we're going to start with perspective today on day 2. I'll give you a little example of perspective first so that you can kind of, oops, got to get down to our perspective. So the example I'm going to give today is a book written by an author named Anne Foistel. And her book is Our Favorite Movies. The subtitle is How Films Affect Our Mental Health. So she's very concerned with normalizing that conversation about mental health so that people can not feel shame and guilt about talking about their own journey. So she really models that for us in her book. And her perspective is not what we normally see in mental health books. She's not a therapist. She's not a counselor. She has been a peer counselor. But her perspective is coming from the point of view of someone who's experienced these mental health challenges and has even been hospitalized for it. So she even has a story about being in the psych ward. So she's very, very open and upfront. She's super bright and has taken all this experience and put it together in a way that helps other people, that may be struggling with the same or similar kinds of issues. So it's a unique perspective. And she comes from the point of view of having films be able to be a coping device for when she is struggling with her mental health. And also the connection of watching movies with other people to form that connection. And you know how you always analyze the movie after you watch it with whoever you've seen it with, and you have to hash out all the things that you've learned from it or things that you liked or didn't like about the film. So she brings all of this unique perspective about cinema therapy, which is actually a thing. Look it up. Cinema therapy is a real type of therapy. And she is one of the important voices now in that conversation because of her unique perspective. She's not a film critic, a professional film critic, and she's also not a psychologist. So she brings a new voice to that conversation to help people with that. And it's just a beautiful combination that she brings to the world. So she brings all of her loves, her love and fascination with mental health, also with movies, and brings them together into a beautiful and very helpful publication. So what is perspective? Perspective is the things that make you uniquely you. I use the example often of, I have 3 brothers, and we've gone through obviously many of the same experiences, but we filter everything through our own experience. So our experiences are actually unique. So what I took away from it as an experience as a kid might be really different from what my brothers took away from it, because our perspectives are different. It's like a filter that you see the world through. So what kinds of things make up our perspective? There are things like everything from where we grew up, the type of family that we grew up in, how many siblings we have, whether we grew up with cousins, what schools we went to, how we kind of made friends, and the culture that we grew up, maybe the religion or spiritual practice that we grew up in. All of those things really inform our perspective and make us see the world in a completely unique way. So now it's your chance. If you haven't already, I know Marilyn's an A student, has already done her homework. But if you haven't, in your workbook, it's page 5 in your workbook. The Make a Ripple workbook is a series of questions. And the first one is, what factors make up your unique perspective? And that's just what I was talking about, your background, your experience. So take a few moments to jot down those things you might think about from the very beginning, as far as you can go back in your life. Think about it from the inside out. So like from your family unit, maybe out to the next ripple, which might be your neighborhood. And then the next ripple, which might be your culture or your religious experience. And then school and friends. And then later in life, your work and maybe businesses that you've had. So I'll be quiet now and let you take some notes about that. Okay, if that wasn't enough time to jot down some notes, you can always come back to this later. So what kinds of things were you guys coming up with? You can unmute and come on and share if you like. What factors make up your unique perspective? What came up for you with this question?
Okay, I'll go.
Thanks, Laura.
Observation. I just have always been really observant, and the different ways that has manifested over the course of my life has really been, I mean, in some ways it turned into a coping mechanism. In other ways, it turned into a gift. So yeah, that I hadn't really thought about it like that before this exercise. So that was really helpful.
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing, Laura. Anybody else want to share?
I will. I was born into a very strict spiritual community, and I eventually rebelled and even got myself excommunicated from the church because I married outside my religion. Years later, I started being interested in personal development, personal growth. I created 3 personal development companies, and am now still teaching awareness and perspective and beliefs management. And although on the outside, it looks like I've departed a lot away from my early childhood, I really see how I still, even though I am not as dogmatic, I still believe in peace on earth, goodwill towards humanity, and am working with the purpose that more and more people can deliberately create their lives so that we can contribute to this, to the planet. And so I see that even though I'm no longer a Mennonite, which I was, in my heart, I'm just expressing a lot of what I learned as a child in a different way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it shows your perspective is created, right from the beginning too. Of course, we can change that perspective as you have, you've taken it and looked at it approached it from a different point of view.
Yeah.
Different angle. Thanks for sharing, Marilyn. Yeah. I came up with things like, background, but also personality. And that leads us into our next question. So what experiences have changed your perspective? And so I took some notes about this too. So there's big events, there's whether, those things that really impact your life, like maybe your parents getting divorced, if there's addiction in your family, if you've made big moves, we talk about army brats or military brats who move around a lot, that really affects them in different ways. Some kids become very outgoing, some kids become introverts, travel changes our perspective, and all our relationships do too. But there's also, like Laura was talking about, those things that are just part of our personality, which are like being really observant. For me, I remember being a very sensitive kid. And maybe some of you can relate to that. And also those things that we just come in with, like Marilyn, you were talking about just being extroverted and liking to connect with people and talk and work through those, that new knowledge with someone else. You wanted to talk about it. So those kinds of things can change our perspective. So you can go ahead and make some notes about those things too in your workbook that really come up for you about that change your perspective or helped shape it. And then for these next two questions, let's just go ahead and talk through these. How does your perspective give you a unique way of approaching your work? And in the same vein, how does your perspective make you different from other people doing similar work? What do these questions spark for you after looking at your background, what shapes your perspective, and what may have changed your perspective or helped shape it? I'll start us off with that. So Marilyn, like you, I grew up in a pretty strict religious community. And So in a way, I found real comfort in that, but in a way, I really wanted to rebel from that too. So I still have a very deep spiritual practice, and I love that. It's a very important part of my life. So I credit, that religious background with giving me that, but now I approach that from a different perspective too. But it is very much a part of my life and the way I approach my work. And I think that's one thing that sets me apart from other people doing similar work, from people who are book coaches or are involved in helping people publish their books. I'm much more concerned with the personal development aspect, the personal growth, what we can get with a transformation that we can get from books, rather than just the how-tos or theoretical kinds of ideas. I want to understand someone's story and how that can help other people live better lives and have the same kind of transformation. So that's what that looks like for me. What does that spark for you as you think about these? Anybody care to share their thoughts on this?
Can you rephrase the question?
What's that?
Oh, can you rephrase the question again?
Yeah, so how does
Or ask the question
your
again.
unique perspective influence how you move in the world? Either personally or professionally, how does that inform how you live your life?
So for me, I'm very accepting and not judgmental. And so what someone kind of brings to the table is what I expect is or assumed to be. I mean, I personally have, my beliefs and morals and principles like you, but I don't race to judge in a lot of ways. And that's I think it's helpful in my industry and what the world around all of us has really changed. And especially as I get older and the new generations coming in, I am transitioning. I'm challenged to understand how to communicate with those newer groups, and so I want to accept them and understand them. And I get frustrated because of the differences, and I don't want to feel frustrated about that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jennifer.
Sure.
I think that acceptance begins with ourselves, right? Accepting our own uniqueness, and that helps us have that perspective with others too. So who else would like to share?
I'll share. So observation, for whatever reason, the ways that it was sort of shaped around necessity, I guess, in my early years. And it just became, the way I moved through the world. And so now I find with meditation practice and different kinds of things, I'll be excited about some technique, and then I realize, oh, I'm already doing that. And it takes a minute, because we have the tendency, or we've been taught, or that there's an authority outside of ourselves. And so but when you're constantly observing, there's you figured out a lot of things, and it takes a minute to realize, oh wait, I did that. I figured that out, and I'm the authority for myself. So that's how it's impacted me. It's that, I just kept waiting for someone else and finally realizing like, oh, that someone else is me
Right.
and I have the tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. That's a huge realization. You know, and maybe you can be a light for others too. When you realize, you know, you've got that, can share that with others, because we all have that within, but we don't always know that or embrace that. So thank you everyone for sharing. This has been really interesting. I love this exercise because it helps us talk about things that we're not thinking about all the time. We're not used to, you know, thinking about ourselves in this way, about what our passions are, what our unique perspective is. But I think it's really helpful, like I said, to connect with our own uniqueness first so that we can bring that to the world. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about how these things, passion and perspective, influence our impact. And that's the way, not just that we move in the world, but how that affects the other people that are in our world, you know, so that we know how we're making a difference. We're shining our light one way or the other. You know, we're making some impact on others, whether we do it intentionally or not. So when we look at our impact, we can make it more intentional and make it more the way that we want to affect others in the planet, whether it's in relationship or in our writing, in our speaking, how we come across and work and move in the world. So this is where it all comes together tomorrow. So if you've got your workbook, go ahead and work through some of those questions. They're on page 6. Actually, the pages are not numbered correctly. Anyway, so start on page 7, because that's where it talks about impact, and then the questions are on the next couple of pages. So we'll talk about those tomorrow, and really how we bring that to the world in a powerful way. So any other questions or comments before we wrap up today with perspective? All right. Well, I appreciate you so much. I'm full of gratitude for you being here. And if you're listening later, please work through your workbook, and we'll come together tomorrow to really wrap it up and see how all this stuff comes together in a powerful way with impact. So thank you for being here on Make a Ripple Challenge Day 2, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.